everyone, my name is Cynthia. Let's talk books. And just a quick note that I'm not filming at my usual time or using natural light, which is what I normally do. So this is a bit of a test video. I'm also filming right after a long day of work, so we'll see how this goes. Just a warning. But today I want to talk about all the books I read in September, because I read quite a few books, a lot of really great stuff. And Latinxathon took part at the end of September. Latinx Heritage Month is about to end, and so it's a lot of Latinx writers that I read during the month of September and October. So let's get started right away. But the first book that I finished in September was Esperanza Rising by Pam Munoz Ryan. I gave this 5 out of 5 stars because I was just really drawn into the story, felt emotionally connected throughout the entire thing, and then finally cried with the author's note at the very end. It is the story of Esperanza, who is a wealthy Mexican teenager, not even teenager, preteen, when her father dies, and because her uncles inherit the land, they are putting a lot of pressure on her mom for her to marry one of the uncles and to basically like merge wealth and all that. The mom is not having any of it, and they're able to get visas to come and work in the US. So there's a lot of layers here. A lot of discussion about immigration, but also about class and poverty. It really comes through to me, and there's a scene in which Esperanza is being asked to sweep a porch, and she has never had to grab a broom and sweep, and she doesn't know how to do it, and she has to be taught how to do it. And I really enjoyed this story. I was reading some of the Goodreads reviews though, and I was noticing that with this and another book that deals heavily with immigration, that listen, if you don't like a book, you don't like a book. Nobody can make you like a book. But I did feel that some of the reviews were being unfair to it. Like people were complaining that Esperanza as a preteen was having to work the fields, be financially responsible, that she was against some of the striking that was occurring. And I felt like that was unreasonable and unfair to review the book and to review it negatively because of that. The story is based on real events that the author's grandmother lived through, and that was like something very real that was going on in the 1930s US, that a lot of immigrants didn't support striking, and they didn't for financial reasons. That a lot of the Dust Bowl immigrants coming into California were combined with immigration, were creating an economic situation that was not tenable for anybody. And anyways, I'm going to stop going around. I just felt like some of that was unfair. The book is not going to be for everybody, but as an immigrant, I really connected to it. Really loved the history in it, all of that. I thought it was wonderful. And I highly recommend the audiobook for it as well. It's very, very short and very doable. The next book that I finished in September was Freshwater by Akwaeke and Emezi. And this was such a brilliant book, so layered. Like, you can't just read it once. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars because it's a book I'm gonna want to pick up again. I checked out from the library, but I'm gonna have to buy it because it's the story that is not necessarily explicitly dealing with a transgender individual, but the book is talking about what it must feel like to be transgender, because we're following a Nigerian individual named Ada, and they feel like there's a conflict occurring in their body where the body has been holds several different souls. It holds Ada, but it also holds these other spirits. The author's really using Nigerian mythology to explain what it feels like to have these different personalities that come through at different moments, that act as a self-preservation mechanism, but also like what it feels like to feel different genders. And I saw in some of the Goodreads review again that some people were interpreting that as being like talking about multiple personality disorder, and I did not get that at all. I can see how that connection could be made, but given the author's kind of personal history, it's very clear that it's really talking about, you know, kind of some of the conflict that occurs within someone when they don't feel the gender that is expected of them. And oh my goodness, there's so many trigger warnings in this story. Sexual assault, suicidal thoughts, suicidal attempts, physical self-harm. I think I'll just put a list down below, because if you're not in the right headspace for some of those really important topics, you'll probably just want to skip the book. But I do think that it's a really important, really beautiful book. I've already purchased the author's second book, which is right here. Let me pull it out. Pet, and it sounds like it'll be just as awesome. So I'm really looking forward to it, and highly recommend Freshwater. The way it brings in Nigerian mythology to a modern setting, and it's beautiful. I'll leave it at that, and I'll keep going here. The next book that I finished in September was The Right Swipe by Alisha. I don't currently have the physical copy on me, even though I own it, because it's at school. My students are working on projects that kind of relates. But The Right Swipe is it's a romantic comedy, and I liked it. I liked it a lot. Is it like extraordinary, and is it extraordinary and you need to go out and run and buy it? No, but it was a fun read for me. One of the main male character is Samoan, and I was sharing this on Instagram that The Rock is like my soulmate. Okay, not really. The dog's my soulmate, but he was like the love of my life, The Rock. Way back when he was in the WWF at the time, I fell in love with him and have been following his career for a long time. And so I imagined the main character, the main hero, as like The Rock, and so it just made the reading experience really good for me. The main female character, Rhiannon, I thought was a bit too harsh, and so like she was rejecting love quite a bit, and I felt like some of her reactions were not completely reasonable at times. But overall, it didn't deter from my enjoyment of the book. The story also deals with head injuries in the NFL, which is something that is really important to the main male character of the story. So, you know, it was a good, fun read. The audiobook is really nice, but it can also be quite forgettable. So there we go. I'll leave it at that. I gave it 3 out of 5 stars, by the way. The next book I finished in September was Ayesha Last by Uzma, Jalaluddin, and this is a Pride and Prejudice retell where the characters are Muslim Canadians, and it's a wonderful story. It like takes a lot of the beats in the Pride and Prejudice story, but really like taking the setting of a Muslim community really seriously, and like not ignoring conflict within the Muslim community and discussions within it. So it felt something like that if you're Muslim, you're going to be able to recognize a lot of elements here. And for those of us who are not, there are going to be parts in here that don't feel all that recognizable, but can still be appreciated. I appreciated a lot of the story. I did feel there were times in which too much of the Pride and Prejudice elements were there, only because I really appreciate when a story can take Pride and Prejudice and really, really make it its own. And while I did feel like this book did a lot of that, I felt like there were times in which it was adhering a little too much to the Pride and Prejudice formula. And there were elements that I just didn't like, the way certain characters reacted to certain things was just a little off for me, but overall super enjoyable. I really recommend this book. The audiobook's really good as well. The next book I read was Single White Vampire by Lynsay Sands. So this is where am I at? I think this is book 3 or 4 in that series. This was a fun read. I enjoyed it. The series follows a family of vampires. The mythology is a little bit different in that they kind of connect their vampirism back to the city of Atlantis, and that they were an advanced society that figured out how to get the human body to repair itself using blood and using almost like nanotechnology. And in this story, we're following Lucerne Argano, who is a romance novel writer. That part I thought was really fun. I thought the main female character, Kate, was super fun. So the kind of humor that has been present in every book so far was still present here. I'm giving it 3 out of 5 stars. This is nice, fun read, very light read, and that's why you would pick it up. You're not going to pick it up for anything too deep. There we go. Next book that I finished in September, I actually have the hard copy of right in front of me, and that is Pride by Ibi Zoboi. Another Pride and Prejudice retelling. I've been really into Pride and Prejudice retellings lately. This was really, really fantastic. I had heard some critical reviews of it that kind of talked about how Zoboi tries to do too much in what is really a short YA novel. And maybe it was because I listened to it in audiobook. I didn't feel that. There were moments in here in which, okay, you can tell like she's trying to hit the Pride and Prejudice beats, but the story really does center on the unique elements. And here we're following a Haitian and Dominican immigrant family in New York. The main character, Suri, is super relatable in a lot of ways. She's a little prickly, kind of, a little hard to get to know, but I liked that about her. I love the way she talks about going to college, and there's a college visit in the middle of the story, and I just really, really enjoyed it. I did feel like the Darcy characters, kind of extended family, could have been handled a little bit differently, but I also understood like she's trying to hit certain beats again with the Pride and Prejudice retelling. What did I give this? Probably 4.5 stars. I really enjoyed this. On top of it, it is read by Elizabeth Acevedo, which I knew the whole time I was listening to the audiobook. I knew the voice sounded really familiar because Elizabeth Acevedo narrates her own books, and so I could just tell. I was like, I've heard this voice before, but it wasn't until the end in which she says her name that I was like, aha. Really enjoyable. So it's a great kind of audiobook to pick up, and I think that the story is really fantastic. I do have to say though, I love old Pride and Prejudice retellings, and so yeah, not that. The next book that I read, oh, and by the way, Pride, I did read as part of Latinxathon. The next book was the group read, and that was the Greve Keeper by Alexandra Villasante. I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars. It was one of those books that I picked up. I had it on an ebook, and I was like, I'm just gonna get a little reading done in before bedtime. I forced myself to put it down at around 1:30 a.m. because I had to get to sleep so I could function the next day at work. It's just really compelling, very readable. The premise is that you have two immigrant sisters who have made their way through Mexico and to the U.S. They get caught and are in a detention center in the U.S. And the oldest sister is trying to do everything to like keep it together, keep her sister safe, and she is offered the opportunity to take on the grief, the PTSD, the depression of somebody else in exchange for legal residency and citizenship. So she does it, and then you're kind of following what that ends up meaning and the relationships with all the people that they are around. I really enjoyed it. It really made me think. I kept talking about this book with my boyfriend, and I think I might send it to my sister because I think she would enjoy it. It was a bit of a surreal experience because I am dealing with some depression myself. I'm fighting it, and so to read these descriptions of someone going through like an extreme depression, PTSD, well, it was super compelling, and it didn't negatively affect me. It actually helped me recognize some of the things that I was going through, even though mine were not at the same level. Yeah, it somehow like helped. And then thinking about the unequal, like the huge discrepancy in power when it comes to immigrants held in detention facilities, and because that's going on right now, and I firmly believe that the things going on in these detention facilities are much worse than we currently know, and what we know now is pretty bad. But because there's such an imbalance of power in there, I just know that when all is said and done, we're going to find out that it was worse than a lot of people thought. And so I felt very connected to the story, and maybe I'll just leave it at that as well. I do highly recommend it. The sci-fi elements are here. I thought were handled really well, but the story is very humanized and based on characters, and I just really enjoyed it. I did think the end was a little bit too like, whoa, let's wrap this all up in a neat little bow, but it didn't take away from my enjoyment of the rest of it. The next book that I picked up was Undead Girl Gang by Lily Anderson, and this is a zombie book. It's a zombie YA book that follows a Latinx teenage girl as she resurrects her best friend because everyone thinks the best friend has committed suicide, and she is very firm that that could not have been possible. She believes that her best friend was murdered, and that the only way to prove this is to bring the friend back and solve the murder. Over the course of the story, there's a lot of discussion about friendship, about relationships between siblings, discussions of death, depression after the death of a loved one. There's a lot going on here, and yet it feels like a light, fun book at the same time that you are reading pretty heavy things. And I really enjoyed it. Yeah, I think, did I give it 3.5 or 4 stars? I gave 4 out of 5 stars. I might bump it down to a 3.5. But I really, really enjoyed it, and I would definitely read more by Lily Anderson. The next book that I finished in September was kind of my one non-Latinx book during the readathon, and that is Ruth Ware's The Death of Mrs. Westaway. I'm giving this 3 out of 5 stars. It's a very atmospheric book. There's just a lot of description, a lot of focus on character development, and not a whole lot of plot. That was my kind of a big beef with it, is that I am more of a plot-driven reader, and there's just limited plot in here. But I did find like that the atmosphere is done really well. The story is very enjoyable. The mystery is compelling, although I kind of figured out a large chunk of it. And I read it for my book club. The book club really loved it. So if you're into this kind of story, I think this is a good one. It was my first Ruth Ware, and I'll definitely read a few other things, and we'll see, how I do with some of her other books. But that one was enjoyable. So 3 out of 5 stars. The next book I read for Latinxathon was Shadowshaper by Daniel José Older. Last month I read Dactyl Hill Squad. Was it last month or the month before? Anyways, I thought Older was brilliant in that book, and so I've been wanting to pick up more things from him. And when I saw that my library has Shadowshaper, I immediately picked it up. The story is you're following an Afro-Latinx teenage girl, when she realizes that she comes from a line of people that can give life to shadows. Like, she can give a temporary home to souls out of shadows and paintings, and like that can be very beautiful and a positive experience, or it could be negative experience. And somebody is kind of taking over this world, killing shadow shapers, and forcing souls into shadows, and she is out to stop it. I give the story 3 out of 5 stars. I think it's, I love the premise. I think the execution was a little rough in that there's too much plot. And I know I just finished telling you that I'm a plot-driven reader, but at times I felt like explanation and world building was sacrificed for plot. And like, I don't like it when that happens either. It does take away a little bit from my enjoyment, but I definitely want to read more Undead because I think his more recent stuff is so good. And I know he's coming out with a book in a couple of weeks, and that looks fantastic. I've heard great things about, and I will pick it up. The next book was Survivor in Death by J.D. Nora Roberts. What book is this in the series? It's part of the In-Death series, number 20. With these in-depth books, I tend to not rate them on Goodreads because they're my comfort food. Like, I read them before bed, so way to relax. Yeah, they're murder mysteries in a futuristic world, but they're just comfort food. I know what to expect. I know that I will get a good story with decent writing at minimum, and they're just good. So this one was pretty good. You're following Eve Dallas, and you're still seeing her relationship with her husband work develop really nicely, seeing how her relationships with the people around her deepen, and yeah, I'll leave it at that. Just nice installment in the In-Depth series. The next book I read was the last book I read in September, and that's Blanca and Roja by Anna Marie McLemore. This, if you saw my Latinxathon vlogs, you know that I had a problem with the writing because it's very descriptive, very lyrical, very poetic. And so that is just not my preference in the kind of writing I like to read, but there's definitely an audience for it. And if that's your jam, I think this is a really great story because I give it 3 out of 5 stars. I was compelled. I wanted to know what was going to happen. It's the story of 2 sisters who are cursed. I think it's after the age of 15 or 16 when they both hit that age. Swans come in and they take one of the sisters. Their family is cursed that every generation has 2 daughters and one is taken and turned into a swan. And these 2 sisters have been kind of trying to negotiate with this curse for a long time. There's also really fabulous romantic interest. One kid is being abused in his family, and there's a family secret that needs to come out. The other love interest is a transgender boy, and the discussion about gender pronouns and what that means for him is beautiful. It's taken seriously without it all being about that necessarily. Like, you still see his relationship with one of the sisters develop, and like, it's so beautifully done. McLemore, I think, because of her own personal story, just really knows how to present that in the story, and how to make the whole plot compelling without a lot of plot. So again, that was one of my critiques of it, is that there's not a lot of plot, and I wanted to know what was going to happen with the sisters. And there's just long periods of time in which you're doing character analysis, and it was compelling enough that I enjoyed aspects of it. But again, for readers like me that are heavily plot driven, I would not fully, like, there's not going to be fully a lot of plot there for us. So I want to read other things by McLemore because the writing, so I heard somebody describe it as that they write like they're writing a fairy tale. And I thought that was so true. And I'm interested in some of the plots in their other books. So knowing that they write in this kind of lyrical way, I know I'm not going to do well with the physical book, but I know that I would do better with an audiobook. With this style of writing, I think I'll be better able to kind of stick with it and read it quicker if I'm doing it on audio. So that's what I'm going to try. And I think that, like, I'm kind of feeling a conflict within me where we're like, okay, the writing wasn't entirely my cup of tea, but I think the stories are important. I feel like the way queerness and transgender issues are brought in are handled so well. And having now learned a little bit more about McLemore, I can understand now why it's handled so well. I want to support the writing. I want to support these kinds of books. And so to overcome kind of the issue of the writing for me, I think the audiobook will be perfect. There, I think I've neatly wrapped that up. Hopefully it made sense to you guys. I had a pretty good reading month, and it has continued into October. Latinx Heritage Month has been really great for me, and I can't wait to talk to you about some of the books that I've been reading in October. But for now, here's September. Let me know what you read for Latinxathon, or just what Latinx books you've been reading, because that was such a large part of my September reading. If you've read any of these books, agreed with some of my thoughts, or totally disagreed, feel free to let me know down below. That's part of the fun of this community. I love chatting about this stuff. But thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.